You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Redding, but my friends call me Spanners. So let's be friends. We are an independent podcast produced in the podcasting shed with the kind permission of our better halves. We aim to bring you a race review before your Monday morning commute. We might be wrong, but we're first. And sometimes we're wrong about being first as well. Welcome to another magazine show where we bring you top voices from around the world, or just whoever is available and willing to chat with us. This week, though, we have hit the jackpot. We are going to Beijing to catch up with our China F1 correspondent to find out how China is treating their F1 representative, Guan Yu Zhou. We get to chat to a real F1 comms officer, Matt Bishop, who is currently in charge of all the social media and communications at Aston Martin. But first, we go to America and catch up with one of the foremost voices in American F1 podcasting. It's Matt Trumpets. Hello, Matt.
Hey there, Spanners.
But I don't really mean you. No, there is another. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is America's fairest of them all? Is it Matt Trumpets? No, the mirror says. It's another, the host of chart-busting US F1 podcast, The Ringer F1. It's Kevin Clark joining us today. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Spanners. Hello, Matt. How are you?
We're very good. But listen here, Kev, K-Dog, Clarky boy. It's rare that it's rare. I'm being confrontational. It's rare that I acknowledge another F1 podcast even exists, let alone recommend one. But I think it is fair to say that the Ringer F1 has been a launch pad, kind of gateway drug for many US F1 fans.
I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I think that I've probably listened to you guys more than any other F1 pod over the past, I'd say 3-4 years, whenever I started watching the sport. And so it is like, even listening to that theme song and knowing I was going to be the guest is a real thrill, truly.
Oh, that's very kind. But your background isn't Formula One. I see you on the internet. You're there with all the football and the grunting and the NFL and the stuff and the screaming. What's your kind of F1 origin story, which was, in fact, a question from our listener, Sean?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I wrote about this a couple of years ago when I wrote the first piece about the Netflix show. I got into it before the Netflix show, but you and I have talked about this. I don't begrudge anyone who got into it through Netflix. No,
but you did feel the need to specifically clarify that you got in before.
Yeah, just timeline-wise. I mean, there's so many people who got into it for the reality TV show aspect and are now, deep in the weeds of understanding the tech part of it. And so I don't think how you got into it in America is necessarily, I don't think that suggests anything about your level of fandom, because there's some people I know who say, I never watched a car race until 2018. I saw that, I saw Daniel Ricciardo without his shirt off, and now I know everything about rear wings. Like that's fine. It's a totally fine origin story. But I got into it. It's kind of a strange way to start a story. Just go with me. My wife and I got hit by a car walking down the street,
and that's Sunset, all we've got time for.
On Sunset Boulevard in I think it was 2017. It was 2017. And the injuries weren't that bad. Like it was a totally harrowing experience. Went to the hospital for a little bit, but the injuries weren't that bad. But I had nothing to do while recovering from this. Nothing. It was the dead of summer. I think it was July. I hate baseball. It's the most boring sport in the world. There was no sports to watch. My work
Have
would
you
not
seen
let...
cricket?
No, don't worry about it. You're not really missing too much, Kev. You're okay. Stick to F1.
So the Ringer Cricket show would probably not be a huge phenomenon.
Oh my
God. It would not be chart busting.
This thing takes 5 days.
So my work would not. We're just like, you stay at home for weeks, get better, all that stuff. I was waking up at weird times, and I saw a practice session of F1. And I, at this point, like anybody, knew who Lewis Hamilton was, knew who Sebastian Vettel was, probably knew the best teams at that point, but I probably did not know who Daniel Ricciardo was then. And actually, oddly enough, Ricciardo was the first driver I ever saw kind of returned after one of his practice laps, and they kind of did the whole, oh, he's so happy, he's smiling, kind of the whole thing that everybody does around Ricciardo, just how happy he was to be in F1. And I noticed I just liked everything about it. I mean, at the most basic level, Spanners, it's a travel show, right? Like you can just go, oh, I'd like to be in Barcelona this week. I'd like to be in Monaco this week. I'd like to be in, whatever it is, Silverstone. Hey, I'd love to be in England. And you can get into it that way, or you can get into the competitive aspect. Like I'm wired to love the competition part of it. There's a line in Ross Brawn's book that I think about a lot where he says that if you took the car that wins the first race, in some years, that car might finish last in the last race of the year. And I don't even know how true that is, especially with some of the teams that have been dead last in the last couple of years. But when you think about every single race is some of the smartest people in the world trying to problem solve. That's not a million miles away from anything that I love about football, the team building aspect of it, how things work. I mean, it's puzzles, right? It's puzzles. It's how do we do this? I mean, you look at Mercedes. A year ago, the unquestioned masters of the universe, they can't figure out anything this year. Everything works for like one session. And that's what's amazing about F1 is that you can be left behind so quickly. And that's what I love about the American sports that I love is that it's the most competitive thing on the planet. And even within that, even within the sports realm, you're looking at some of the smartest people. I mean, some of these team principals, it's not like if they left, they would go be team principal somewhere else. They might be CEO of a motor company. They might be CEO of a racing company or a car company or even a data company. They can do whatever. These are some of the smartest people in the world trying to outsmart each other. And that's what I loved about it. And I just became obsessed almost immediately, Spanners.
Well, do you know what? That's really interesting to hear. First of all, Ross Brawn could not have predicted the Sirotkin-Williams matchup when saying that the championship winning car might finish last. But I'm really glad to hear, quote unquote, newer fans able to kind of have that kind of instant attraction to the sport. I've loved since I was 8 years old because I've almost felt like I've had to justify to myself my F1 fandom when things can sometimes move so slowly. And I've said to Matt many times that I feel like Formula One, it's not really a competition over a day or a race or even a season. It's a career game, and you watch a driver progress from start to finish. You watch whole eras play out, and you kind of summarize those. And so I was a little bit worried when we had this big influx of fans. I'm almost apologetic to them. I'm almost kind of like, no, hang on, just watch it all play out. I promise. And and Matt, this is something I've discussed with you many times.
Yeah, it is. It can be hard when every race seems like the entirety of all the data you've ever consumed to understand how we're barely getting started. We haven't even seen a lot of representative tracks, like for example, in this season.
Yeah, I know. There's so many street circuits. I keep trying. Anyone who listen, I'm telling them this is not a normal F1 calendar. 6 street tracks and Bahrain and Barcelona and Imola being the only normal tracks in the calendar so far is not representative of what we might expect from Formula One. But it's to go back to Kev though, you've been able to see it, adopt it, embrace it into your heart, and in America, your sports are much more glamorous, are much more on the nose, perhaps from a publicity entertainment point of view. Liberty Media, an American firm, came in to take over an essentially European sport, arguably, and said every single race should be like a Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And to me, that was alarming and frightening. Is it working out? Because you've kind of become a fan before the transition. You've seen you people, yeah, that's right, you people take over and try and make every race a Super Bowl. I see what they're going for. Every race does need to be exciting. They feel the pressure if it isn't. How do you feel that's going?
It's going great. So let's start with the fact that I actually disagree. I think Formula One is more glamorous than most American sports. Michael Jordan is showing up some places, but he's not. He's showing up at F1 and he's being embraced, and he's there with David Beckham and Tom Brady, and LeBron James was in Monaco. These guys want to be there. Jerry Jones, who's one of the most famous sports figures in America, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, sort of the epitome of American billionaire glamour, was doing the grid walk at Monaco. So these guys want to be there. And listen, maybe it's a grass always greener thing. Maybe F1 and European fans will think that the NFL is more glamorous, and NFL and NBA people think F1 is more glamorous. Remember, it's something we talked about on my show. We only get the best bits of of European culture, right? Like we don't get the worst part of it, and you only get the best part of American sports. You're only seeing highlights of like you're not seeing a random Cleveland versus Detroit game, preseason game in August. You're only seeing like Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl.
No, that is true. Like whenever I've caught clips of American football, it is the most fantastic and exciting thing. But on the odd occasion where I've caught it live, I'm like, okay, like, can you do something? And the equivalent is like you might watch the Champions League, but you've not sat with me in the stands and watched Colchester United in a 1-1 draw against Leyton Orient with like hardly any passes played along the floor.
Right, exactly. That's the exact analogy. But what I think that if you marry the glamorous part of it and all of the concerts that used to happen and all of that stuff and still do happen with the Netflix show, what Americans love is superstars, and they'll tune in for any superstars.
Yeah.
Part of the problem with American baseball is they don't generate superstars anymore for a whole host of reasons. The NBA still does. That's why they retain why it retains its cultural foothold. What Netflix did and what Formula One have done to further that is they've created 20 TV characters. And it's funny because in America, whether it's NASCAR fans or IndyCar fans, a handful of them have come at me, not come at me, but whenever I make a point about NASCAR and its popularity, they say, well, NASCAR has, in some dozens of passes at the top of a race over the course of the 500 miles. There's way more parity, all of that stuff. And I say, well, it doesn't necessarily matter because Netflix has created TV characters and people are tuning in to see what happens to the TV characters in the same way they would Homeland or the new Marvel show. Like, let's see what happens to Lance Stroll this week.
Well, in the last show, I sort of compared it to Jersey Shore a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, so some people are tuning in for the Jersey Shore, but that's okay. You can tune in for the drama and the characters, or for the sport, or for the tech, or for the smell of the petrol, or you can tune in for the glamour. There really is a lot to love about F1.
Yes, and so then the Netflix show carries over from the week to week. I was in the paddock in Miami, and someone like Yuki Tsunoda would come in, and it was like everybody was the fifth Beatle, except Lewis Hamilton, who was the first Beatle, right? And you'd gotten to the situation where I couldn't believe how much these drivers had resonated in America, walking through what you guys call the car park, very quickly. I mean, this was I go to sporting events all the time. I go to Super Bowls, I go to NBA finals. All right,
bragging.
And
check this guy. I'm in Miami.
I have a frame of reference. I have a frame of reference on this stuff, and the pandemonium around the 13th, a Pierre Gasly type, was similar to some of the biggest stars at their sporting event. And part of that is just I think that what Liberty has done they've created this ecosystem where everybody knows everything. The depth that these people know and can identify with is so deep, and that's what's changing. There were so many American sports leagues who would kill for that kind of depth with their participants among the general public.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think part of that, too, is you've only got 20 drivers to start with. And then you've got an incredible scarcity, especially here in the United States. I mean, we're getting 2 races this year, but geographically, we're Europe plus size. So I can understand why. But the question is, are they getting that same reaction to me, like in Europe or in Australia? Is it the same, or is it just because it's such a new sport for us?
That's a great question. I think in America, there is sort of a exotic nature of it. Oh, wow, these guys are coming into Miami for 1 week. We don't see them a lot. I mean, I would venture to guess there are a ton of people. This was the first time anywhere near an F1 track. There were people I know. I just saw my wife's cousin over the weekend. He didn't really know what F1 was, and he went to the race because he ended up with some friends who had hospitality things there, and then he said it was the best thing he's ever been a part of, right? And so, again, to further the gateway drug analogy, like I think that there were people there who this was their first experience. Either they got into it through the Netflix thing, and this was them getting hooked, or they just said, hey, Michelle Obama, Michael Jordan, Bad Bunny, all of those absolute superstars are here. I'm going to check this out. That's not happening at NASCAR. That's not happening at IndyCar. That's not even happening at baseball. And so there's just a buzz here that I think builds on itself. And Matt, I agree. part of that is just in America, this seems really cool and new. This is the hot thing. And the same way, I mean, listen, when Liverpool comes to Yankee Stadium and plays in these summer friendlies, Daniel Craig is there, John Oliver is there, all of these extremely famous soccer fans. I mean, I don't know, James Corden always goes to those games. And so you end up with people saying, hey, what's this about? And it's their entry point into it. And it's the most basic and, the most basic and surfacey way into it. But that's how you get people to care. And so, yes, I do think that the newness and the glamour is at this point a uniquely American thing.
You might find that James Corden is more popular in the US than he is in the UK. Personally,
I've heard about this.
Personally, I'm a fan. No, because he's come to the US as like this, almost like Conan O'Brien,
Yes.
Jimmy Fallon type figure. That's not what he was in the UK. He was.
But I've also go ahead.
No, it's fine. Go on. You're the
but I've
guest.
also heard. I also think you guys think he's more famous here than he actually is.
Oh, is he? Oh, okay, good. Well, he was one of the first names you rolled off.
Well, he was in the paddock and he goes to these soccer games all the time. But yes, I mean, part of it with, I remember a line about Pitbull. I think he played the World Cup or one of those games, and somebody said that Pitbull is always one of these guys who seems like he's famous because he's famous in the next country over, and he's never actually famous anywhere. It's like if you're like in Italy, it's like I think he's big in Greece.
I've heard
and in Greece,
I've heard of him.
I think, and it just you just keep going around the world, and there's no actual country.
Speaking of relative levels of fame in the UK, if you're wondering what Kevin Clark would equate to, think of him like a young Jeff Stelling. Won't mean anything.
Oh, come on.
No way. That's a compliment, surely.
No, it is a compliment. It's too much, is what I'm saying.
No, it isn't too much at all. Don't believe his false modesty. And as you will see in what we're about to do, Kevin Clark is full of lies and BS because we are about to debate our hot takes. I asked Kevin and Matt if he has any as well,
yeah.
And I have some too. What are your hot takes on F1 this season? And I will tell them why they are wrong, and they will fawningly agree with my hot takes. That's how I see this playing out.
Amazing.
Okay, good. Let's start with you. In fact, the first one, Kevin, probably is to do with the US popularity of F1.
You want me to unveil that one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So my hot take is that there will not be, at the end of this decade, 3 races in America. Maybe there will be 2, maybe there will be 1. But I think 3 will be the high watermark of F1 in the United States, and at some point there will be a leveling off, and by the end of this decade, we will see a reduction by 1 race.
Why?
Couple things. Number one, it is a little bit analogous to what happened to soccer in this country. Soccer is a mainstream sport in this country, and if you walk around a Champions League final weekend in New York City, you will see people at bars. It will be legitimate. They'll get millions of people watching it. It's on one of whoever has the rights, whether that's Fox, CBS, before that ESPN. It is on main channels.
Is that just Liverpool and with like the Irish population of New York, or is that everywhere?
No, it doesn't matter. I mean, I moved here in 2010. And that was when Inter played, and it was the same thing. People just really care, and so it is a legitimate sport in the same way that it's a little bit different because there's no EPL team here, but like it gets comparable ratings to something like hockey for some of the bigger games. And then the World Cup obviously gets even bigger. But there's always going to be a cap unless America can claim the sport for itself. And that's what happened with European soccer, is that there are a lot of Chelsea fans in Brooklyn. Matt probably sees them all the time. Arsenal fans, Tottenham fans, you see them all the time. But unless they're going every Sunday or Saturday, or for Spurs, they go on Champions League night, so Tuesday and Wednesday. Arsenal's more of a Thursday team. But
that's an insult.
I'm just getting that in there.
Apologise to all our London.
But I think that there was a plateauing in European soccer because there's just not that much of an ecosystem here. The media, we have these shows on ESPN every morning, First Take and all that stuff, where they debate certain things, and it's almost always football and basketball. And then when we're done with basketball, they go back to football. And I think unless you can get in that ecosystem, there's a cap on your cultural relevance. And over time, unless you break in there, and listen, if ESPN resigns, The report is they're going to start sending a reporter to every single track for SportsCenter hits. Maybe they break in on a couple of these radio shows and podcast shows and they get more mainstream relevance. But soccer hasn't really. I mean, there are soccer-specific shows on those networks, but it's not to the level of some of the other major sports in America. So I think at some point we're going to see two things. Number one, an increase in F1 popularity. And then the second thing is a plateauing and sort of a realization that we are where we are with F1, because that's what happened with soccer.
Oh, I mean, even in podcasting, you get like spikes. We go, I found like 1,000 new people and I'm so excited. And then you're disappointed the next week. And it's like, well, no, you found 1,000 new people, but 300 fell in love. So there's a natural kind of plateauing. This might be a hot take. I don't think I've said this on the show before. Don't want to offend any Americans. But before Miami, I would have said you're absolutely wrong. There's going to be 8 US Grand Prix at some point. Unfortunately, I think Miami was a flop. I don't know what it was like from a commercial point of view. But as a race fan, I didn't like the track. I didn't like how it went down. As soon as we saw it in practice, as F1 fans, we kind of went, ooh, this isn't really going to land. And it wouldn't have landed if it wasn't for one of the most random safety cars I've ever seen with Norris. And I think that might have did that hurt the US F1 track schedule?
Couple things. Number one, Matt, I think you can probably speak to this because you obviously talk to a lot of American F1 fans as well. I think that Miami went way too hard on the luxury aspect of it and catered way too much to hospitality and less about just the folks who like Red Bull and want to spend a couple $100 to come down for the weekend. There was not enough catering to that and more to billionaires who wanted to come down and see 2 minutes in the Heineken hospitality area. So I think that may have hurt it because, listen, there's no cap on the amount of people who are going to watch on Sunday, say, this is a cool sport. I'll spend a couple $100 flying down there, a couple $100 at the race, okay? There is a cap for the amount of people who are going to spend $10,000, which is what actually a lot of those hospitality tickets started at. I think it wasn't a flop because I think that we overrate, in America certainly, how much anybody's paying attention to anything. And I think that there were a lot of people who saw David Beckham, Tom Brady, and Michael Jordan in the paddock with Lewis and said that was like the coolest place to be in the world.
FOMO.
James Corden in the James Corden in the McLaren paddock, even though he's not as famous as maybe Brits think he is. But that thing's But Bad Bunny, who's one of the most famous people in the world, frankly, at this point, I just saw he's on the cover of GQ here. He was in the Red Bull paddock. Like that stuff ends up mattering. And in a weird way, for the casual fan, buzz is more important than whether or not there was a classic race. I don't think Miami came into it trying to cater to the diehards.
Well, I'm just going to respond to that by saying that I think when they rebuild stadiums, they add more and more corporate luxury boxes. Yes. And I think they do that for a reason. And I think Miami is just a simple, natural extension of that thinking. Where they may have fallen down, I think, from the point of view of the promoters is I did see some people saying less than positive things about hospitality at that level because it was not the usual Formula One company. It was a more local company, I think, that handled that end of it. So they may catch some flack from that. But I think this is no different to really what Bernie would do. And I think it's going to be hard to always have 3 races because what you really need is municipalities and states that will buy into the amount of money Formula One will bring to them when you have the track. And right now we've got Vegas, which F1 is sponsoring itself for, I assume, reasons. Yep. You've got Texas, which has already been through a couple of sketchy funding eras. And you've got Miami, which is just an admitted tourism money grab. But given Miami, it's kind of a great crossover for them because that is kind of their brand.
Yes. It is. The Vegas, Matt, you know this about the American rhythms. The Vegas one to me is the biggest bet. Everyone says it's going to be epic, and there are people saying it's going to be the crown jewel. It's going against football season in the States. It's going against the holiday season, so you're already getting into how many people are actually going to travel. It's going to be at a weird time. It's going to be basically Saturday night to catch European morning. It's going to be, there's a lot of boxing in Las Vegas, so they're kind of used to doing the 10 p.m., 11 p.m. thing. It's not particularly new to do late night events there. Also, nobody goes to sleep there, so it doesn't matter. Everybody's on drugs. So
allegedly,
it's a risk.
The lawyers.
No. I've been to Vegas. He's pretty much
I've got the lawyers in my ear here. I've added it. But go on, carry on, Perry.
Slandering the city of Las Vegas. No, I don't even think they would take us to court over that. I think that they're comfortable in their
be a gentle nod from
who
a
they
woodsman.
are. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's exactly right. I think that's the biggest risk because I think that there's a chance that it kind of comes and goes without any buzz to America. Maybe everybody in Europe. Listen, when I lived in Los Angeles, I go to Las Vegas probably once every other month. A lot of Brits there. A lot of lads on tour kind of thing.
That's
okay,
the dream.
maybe they can all come down and see that and take the 10-hour flight that they seem to not care about at all. They love coming over. Maybe there's enough of that. But I think that the Miami race was the perfect time in the calendar right after the NFL draft. The NBA playoffs hadn't kicked into gear. I think the Vegas race runs the risk of little to no buzz if they don't play it correctly.
Okay, next hot take from you, Kevin Clark, the USA's Jeff Stelling. Now, I know the next one is about Ferrari, so
it is.
I want to make clear because I'm going to disagree because you've told me in advance. Okay. So that's good. So I'm going to disagree, but I need to make clear I'm not tifosi. I'm not a Ferrari fan. In fact, I do see Ferrari as the old enemy. Ferrari are the Death Star. Ferrari all but ruined Formula One for me in the early 2000s. They were too good. So for me to hear what you're about to say is like saying that Darth Vader, and I've just realized I don't know Star Wars well enough to make this analogy, that Darth Vader will never conquer the Republic ultimately. Yeah. But I've just realized I remember the end of one of those films. What's your next hot take, Kevin?
My next and last hot take is that Ferrari had a great chance to win the Drivers' Championship this year. And it's funny because I think no.
It's June, you lunatic.
That I had.
Wow.
It's funny. I think it was on this show a year ago that one of the tech guys said maybe there's rumors Ferrari's figured something out and that 2022 is going to be their year. They're in the tunnel. They've got something for the new regulations, okay? And that was true. They had a car that could compete for championships. And I called it early. When I saw Ferrari in the first couple of weeks of the season, I said, this is a title-winning car. Red Bull couldn't even finish anything.
We've been hurt before.
And the more we've seen over the past couple of weeks, the more I think for a confluence of reasons, a confluence of events here have come together. I don't think Ferrari is going to win a World Drivers' Championship in this, I don't know what you would call it, era, this set of regulations, because this was their best chance. They have not taken advantage and don't look equipped to take advantage. And from now on, starting next year, people are only going to catch up with them. I don't think, Spanish, you've been on my show saying you don't think that they make the necessary adjustments in the course of the season. What about the necessary adjustment over a decade? Mercedes at some point is going to figure this out. There will be mid-pack teams that figure out something. Red Bull is not going away. Red Bull is so good at putting pressure on you because they do so many things competently. If I were to guess, I would say Ferrari come out of this set of regulations without a trophy.
Oh, we'll go to Matt, but Matt, we have to differentiate between kind of regulation eras and regulation kind of sub-eras. So, for example, 2014, start of a major regulation change. 2017, which was kind of the knee-jerk reaction, we'll call that a sub-regulation era. And then this is like another major regulation era. So other major regulation eras, 2009, with where Braun came in with the blown diffuser. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of scale we're talking. And this is what Kevin Clark is saying. Ferrari to not win another title this century. That's what he's committed to. Riposte, Matt.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to need your help with some history, though.
Oh, okay.
What was the year of Ferrari driving slowly? Was it 2020 or 2019?
No, 2019, they were very slow because they had allegedly been using too much fuel, and there was a secret deal which we know nothing about, which definitely didn't mean that they had an agreement to like be slow that year.
Right. So my riposte to that is very simple. It took them all of 2 years to go from having the worst and slowest power unit to the absolute best, bar none, which they haven't even finished upgrading for this season. And if you look back at Mercedes, and especially if you look at how Mercedes did once some of the other power units got better, hello, Honda. Hi there, Ferrari. Before we found out you were not cheating, but might have allegedly been doing something that wasn't entirely kosher.
Matt, Trumpets views do not represent Missed Apex as a whole.
We see how important the influence at the sharp end of the aero field, the power unit is. And I think right now, Ferrari have the best power unit. And I think probably most of the techie people would either agree or say, well, Red Bull's in with a shout. It's close. But we're still looking at a massive energy recovery system upgrade from Ferrari we know about. And I think that power unit advantage is easier to use the aero to catch up with than vice versa. Oh, I've got really good aero. Hello, Red Bull, the whole time they were there. But if your power unit's nowhere, you can't do anything with that aero.
But to sort of back up Kev a little bit, Ferrari having the best car has happened a few times.
Yeah.
2008, 2017, 2018, arguably.
I was going to say that. So first of all, one of the things I want to point out is that Spanish, you came on my show and you said you love being able to drop hot takes because I'm the person who's going to get the negative reviews.
Oh, no.
There's going to be people. So now I've turned the tables on you.
But
no. Matt, what's interesting is that I certainly agree that they have the best power unit. And actually, I think that that's almost to the point. If you just look at the clients that they have, the customers that they have, it's almost inarguable. But what undoes it is the Ferrari-ness of them. And the fact, and whether that's strategy, whether that's reliability, they just, as Spanner said, they've had the best car before and not come through with it. And so what I think is going to happen, it's not about them having, they may have the best power unit next year, but I think the gap will start to close. And then all of the margins, listen, it's funny because I always talk about this with the NFL, is that there are 10,000 reasons one football team beats another over the course of a 60-minute game. You're talking about one little step here, one little block here. It is so, and all those little tiny edges add up, right? And when I look at Ferrari's power unit, they've got one big advantage. It's almost like having a great quarterback in football where it solves so many of your problems. But I think that there are going to be other teams that start to bridge the gap on the power unit as this era goes on. And I don't think Ferrari has the level of competence of other teams, Mercedes, Red Bull, to where that advantage is going to get them a trophy.
But I will point out that it was not Ferrari that missed their virtual safety car pit stop window.
It's true.
And it was Red Bull. I think at the level, the margins all of these top teams are at, and we've made this same complaint about Mercedes as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you're really seeing right now is a confluence of tracks that particularly benefit Red Bull and the way they tend to do things. And I think as we get into the more traditional circuits, the advantages of the Ferrari design will make themselves known and put them out of that, we made a poor choice and it cost us the race margin.
Mm-hmm. And things
that's really
go.
I was going to say that's an interesting point, but at some point it becomes, Max has won more races that Leclerc had poles on than Leclerc. Like that to me, I think that they have had tracks where they should be fast, they should be winning, and it just hasn't happened.
Yep.
And at some point it becomes a math problem. And it's not like we're going to only Ferrari tracks from here on out. And the lead is pretty significant, I think.
Remember, it wasn't me that slated Ferrari here. It was Kevin Clark. So Kevin Clark at theringer.com to get in touch with you, is that? And that's what you didn't do on your show. You didn't just give out my personal details. So I win. But if people want to follow you on Twitter, it is at by Kevin Clark.
By Kevin Clark.
And not with an E.
Not with an E.
No, normally would
I
be.
get the E. People tack on the E all the time. Even when they're
do.
emailing me. I say, how'd you get the email right?
Yeah.
And then you just get...
What's the proper Kevin nickname in the US? Is it Kev?
Yeah, Kev. I get Kev a lot. Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
So I like to drop the odd KC to see how it lands.
I get KC a lot,
too. If you were in the UK and you were playing football, you would be Clarky. So You should get used to that as well.
So in hockey, that's what they do all the time.
Clarky. Over to the left. Clarky. Okay, there you go.
Yep.
One last question before you go. Allay my fears. All of American sports allow only 3 teams to repetitively play each other over the course of infinity forever, like the franchise model. And I fear the F1 is going for that USA franchise model. It will be 10 teams forever, pretty much. No, I would always want promotion and relegation. I like the dream of like English soccer, where you can come from the bottom and go to the top. Am I wrong to fear this? Is it becoming a closed US franchise shop?
I think so, but I don't know how much it has to do with the American mentality. I mean, I think that almost like what the Super League was.
I'd like to blame someone if that's okay.
Please do. You can blame me personally.
Okay, good.
I went around the paddock in Miami when Andretti was trying to get a team. And I
Clarky's fault.
Don't let anybody else in.
Yeah.
So the Andretti bid is meeting resistance. Zach Brown said that on Monday, I think it was. And you always heard people griping publicly and off the record that they didn't want to split the revenue between 11 teams. There's some mechanisms that F1 has changed over the past few years that make it more like a franchise model. It upsets me because, one of the cool things, and actually NASCAR got away from this too. But what I really liked was 15 years ago when somebody in a garage could have said, hey, I built this, it's ready to rock, let's just see how it goes, and try to get up. I mean, one of the beautiful things about soccer, football, as you want to call it, as the rest of the world except me calls it, is that you can conceivably reach the mountaintop without any buy-in, without anything. And it would upset me if racing became a closed circuit. But I do think that when I talk to the business people associated with any racing, it's becoming more of a franchise model. And I think the best way in now is to sell. I mean, someone said this a couple weeks ago, one of the pundits, but they were saying it's not just that kind of franchise model. The cost cap is also increasing the value of these. And so if you're selling out now, if you're McLaren and you're actually going to sell out to Audi or whomever, or you're Red Bull and you're going to take an investment from Porsche, A, it's hard to get in, and B, you're going to keep costs down, which means that check that they write is going to be massive. There was just a sale recently of the Denver Broncos in the NFL. That the family that owns Walmart bought it. It went for $4.5 billion. $4.5 billion, because they know how much money they're going to make and they know how much money they have to spend. There is a cap on there. F1 is getting closer and closer and closer to that. And I think that if you gave the team owners a choice, that's what they want. They want the Walmart family buying in for a premium because costs are fixed.
Oh, you were meant to allay my fears of a franchise sport, Kevin. You didn't understand the brief, Matt.
Well, I can just chime in by saying that all American sports, all the major sports, have expanded at some point and let more people into the club. The brief on Andretti is they have to prove they will bring more money to the sport than they will cost the teams,
right,
in lost shares, because there's an extra team dividing it up. And to me, that's got to be like a no-brainer for an accountant to put together. But, we are talking motorsports people, so I don't know. But I think it's inevitable. We will see more teams as the sport continues to grow.
So in America, they call it an expansion fee, and you just pay what is the equivalent of the franchise value to the other teams. So the Seattle Kraken just joined the NHL. They paid $650 million to the other teams. So there has to be, I agree with you, Matt, a check that can be written that would allay everybody's fears.
So that figure exists at the moment. It's 200 million.
Are they ready to write that?
Yeah, for a new team to come in, they have to pay 200 million as an offset for what the other teams will lose in prize money at the moment. Yet still there is objection to Andretti.
Well, let me ask you a question. Is there then, so in college football we have this, we have to pay a fee to join something, but then you're not even a full member until 4 or 5 years in.
Yeah.
So there could even be that. You could even put that further constraint on it.
Like a guest membership to F1.
Yeah, kind of.
Well, maybe. To be fair, that is kind of what Minardi, Caterham, and Virgin Racing had, didn't they, in the last era?
Well, this is effectively what we had when only 10 teams got prize money, right? You had 12 teams, only 10 got prize money. There was an automatic relegation once you were the 12th team enough years in a row.
Okay, so I think we can all agree that Americans have ruined F1, and I've played my part by bringing two Americans to Missed Apex podcast. We apologize for any offense that may have caused, but please do follow Kevin Clark by Kevin Clark with no E on Twitter. Do go out and check the Ringer podcast because they do have a lot more reach than we do. You do have an awful lot of interesting guests, and they do have a fantastic sports-obsessed host that lives and breathes competition. We're very impressed by you, Kevin Clark, and we think people should check out your podcast.
Again, I've learned so much from this podcast. It's really a joy, and I'm so glad you guys are having success.
Come hang out with us anytime, Kevin. Well, our next guest in the shed today is an actual F1 team employee, and we rarely make approaches to F1 teams, if I'm honest, because partly you can only hear no so much before you take the hint. Okay, I get it. You're the prom king and I'm the wallflower. But also, part of it is, who am I to go and approach a team? I've put my F1 heroes on such a pedestal that I'd feel like Homer Simpson knocking on the doors of Mount Olympus. Who am I to dare bother the gods? So it is a thrill today to be joined by someone who spent his career in the belly of the beast, from print media motorsport to ending up in McLaren communications, a quick break to bang out a novel, why not? And then ending up at Aston Martin via W Series. We are delighted to be joined in the shed by the Chief Communications Officer at Aston Martin. It's Matt Bishop. Hello, Matt.
Hello there.
It's wonderful to see you. I guess the first question is, what is a Chief Communications Officer?
Chief Communications Officer, eh? Well, it's sometimes called a comms director, sometimes called a head of comms. Basically, everything that comes out of a Formula One team, either in terms of the output on social media, websites, and so on and so forth. We still have websites as well as all the social platforms. Everything has to come through the filter of the kind of messaging that the chief comms officer and his or her team wants the team to adopt. And also, we have to have, hopefully, a positive influence over what mainstream media and indeed other social media, people like your good selves, have to say about ourselves. In fact, ourselves being our team, Aston Martin's Formula One team, and all who sail in her, drivers, bosses, anyone else who we may be wanting to feature. Sometimes it's proactive in the ways that I've just described. Sometimes it's reactive.
See, Chris, actual evidence that we influence actual F1 teams. Chris Stevens is here, by the way.
There you are.
Yeah, I know that. Well, part of the job is having to see what everyone else is doing and saying about your team. And I remember one of my first jobs in a bit of work experience I did was going through a newspaper and circling everything to do with the Broxtowe Borough Council. It was back then.
So, Matt, are you spending time crawling through the internet, seeing how people are reacting, I guess, not only to the team's performance, but to the stuff that you put out as well?
Yeah, to some extent, I do that. And indeed, my colleagues do that. We need to know how Aston Martin and all who sail in her are being perceived. And that means television, radio, newspapers, they still exist, websites, they still exist. And of course, all over social media. The word influencer, is correctly used and widely used now. But some influencers are more influential than others.
Yeah, so you obviously sit up and pay more attention if Matt Gallagher praises you guys more than if Spanner's in a shed, says, "Oh, that Bishop's brilliant."
Spanners in the shed is right up there. It's all good.
That's absolutely fantastic to hear. But I was surprised by the reactions of certain drivers over the last few years. The one that sticks out for me is Valtteri Bottas and the "to whom it may concern," and finding out that wasn't to some agent or spurned lover, that was in response to social media critics. And I was like, oh, wow, that gets to them as well.
Well, it gets to some of them. I work with two drivers, as you do in a Formula One team at the moment. Well, also reserve drivers and driver ambassadors and so on. But two race drivers, Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll. Neither of them is particularly big on social media. Obviously, Seb is famous for being not at all absent entirely, which is very unusual. And Lance obviously has presences, but he I don't think he throws himself into it with quite the elan that some of them do. And that's not bad or wrong, and it isn't better when some of them get very, very involved. I think there's a happy a happy medium, because you want your drivers and indeed sports stars to pay attention. It is useful and interesting if they're engaged, but you don't also want them to get obsessed by it and end up spending a lot of time on it, or indeed getting het up and worried about it.
Yeah, so we've famously heard stories of people like Lando Norris who were too busy on their phone to pay attention during, debriefing meetings, particularly in his first year in Formula One. So I guess, what you say, there's a nice balance to be met there. But I think we're in a position now, Matt, where more and more drivers are starting to create their own brands. So does that affect your job on a sort of day-to-day basis? Are you helping Lance and Seb establish their own brands as part of the team?
I would say so, yes. It's a dual process, perhaps even symbiotic. A very good example is Seb. So, he isn't on social media. He is entirely absent. And yet there have been times when he has been trending on social media despite that. I started working with him. I've known him for 15 years, but I started working with him when he joined, and I joined Aston Martin at the beginning of 2021. And, we sat down and chatted, and it became clear that he wanted to talk about, he'd talk about, the normal things. We talk about the car and the tires and the engine and the lap times and the understeer and the oversteer and all the rest of it. But he also wanted to talk a little bit about things that interested him outside of the sport. And, I've personally been very, very pleased to encourage him around his support of LGBTQ plus issues. I'm a gay man myself, so that was a natural fit for me. And he has been brilliant in that way, and in fact has been massively popular, and I think has engaged and attracted a wider fan base as a result of being prepared to stand up and be counted in that regard. So I would say that's something where you work with the driver and say, what kind of things do you want to say, and what kind of things are you interested in, and we will try to weave those in where possible with what the kind of bread and butter stuff that you have to do anyway.
Well, obviously, you yourself you're a representative of racing pride. You're very open and forthright in LGBTQ issues and visibility. That seems like it was just a match made in heaven, and that you guys can feed off of each other. And very fortunate that he has that view, that willingness, and then his communications officer happens to be exactly you, and that worked out nicely.
He has a very clear, the word we use is allyship. In other words, a straight man, a straight cis het man married to a straight cis het woman, 3 kids, and yet he's absolutely an ally, and he just puts it very plainly and very simply and very beautifully. Really, he says, everyone should have the right to be who they want to be and love whom they want to love. And if you argue with that, then give your head a wobble, really.
Obviously, Seb has done a lot of gestures, like the T-shirt in Budapest last year, in Saudi Arabia as well. Were there ever moments where you were, I don't know, maybe a bit nervous about the response that would get, particularly from like a race promoter or local governments, things like that?
I think as long as he sticks to something that's sensible and defensible, then that's all good. And everything he's done about LGBTQ plus has been.
I think one of the things, me and Chris have spoken about this quite a lot. When Seb does that kind of thing, it's what does it mean to the community? And as a cisgendered straight male, it's, to me, you can kind of be tempted to go, well, why does it matter? Why does getting that message and seeing an ally in motorsport matter?
Well, Racing Pride is an interesting thing. And why did we found it? We founded it in 2019 in association with Stonewall, which is a well-known LGBTQ plus charity. And we did so because there was a need, because we were finding, I've been open in Formula One for nearly 30 years as an out gay man, but I was the only one for a long time. And now there's very few others, but very few. And there are still quite a few hidden. And I was approached by some of the hidden ones, closeted ones. And they might say things like, I've been a mechanic working in Formula One for 15 years. I've never dared to come out. And it's agonizing for me. And now I'm actually going to marry my same-sex male partner, and I'm going to have to keep that a secret from people I regard as some of my best friends. And just think about that for a second. So one of the things we do as Racing Point is take the message to the teams and say, just don't assume. Just don't assume that everyone is a cis-het man or a cis-het woman, but most employees are men anyway. Don't assume that. Try and encourage people. And to some extent, of course, I also try to encourage, but you mustn't coerce people to come out. They must do it when they want to and if they want to. But, when you're ready to, you may find that the people who you think are going to jump down your throat or desert you as friends and colleagues may actually say, mate, thank goodness you told me. I probably always suspected it, and now I'm so pleased that you've told me.
A lot of the thing that people miss when they ask, why is it important that we do this? Nobody's a homophobic anymore, which is just flat out not true. But I think they don't quite understand the sheer terror that goes into coming out.
Coming out is different for everyone. The other point is you don't just come out the once. I remember when I came out when I was 18. And I thought, right, job done. Actually, I'm now 59. And I probably come out about once or twice a month and have done over the past 41 years. Yeah. That's what happens.
At some point, there's going to be a not straight racing driver who enters Formula One. Is the F1 paddock, the communications gearing, ready for what inevitably will be a difficult and challenging scenario, especially in your trade?
Do you know what? I don't think it will be difficult or challenging. In 72 years, there have been 3 that we know of, really, LGBTQ plus drivers. So there's been Nisha Cabral, bisexual, who, by the way, came out at the age of 75. There's been Mike Beutler, who was kind of open as far as you could be open as a gay man in the early 70s in Formula One, in motorsport. In other words, it wasn't written in the pages of Autosport magazine, but everybody knew. And Lella Lombardi, who was a lesbian. So those are the 3 pioneers, really, all now dead. And let me fast forward you to, a fantasy. Let's say that you are sitting at home and you're watching the 2026 Monaco Grand Prix, and you see that Johnny Jenkins, invented name, wins the Monaco Grand Prix for Ferrari, and second is Max Verstappen, and third is Lance Stroll, etc., etc.
Yeah, good, always repping.
And then Johnny Jenkins walks down off the podium and hugs and kisses his boyfriend in the paddock. Do you know what? I think that would immediately go from the proverbial back pages of the newspapers to the proverbial front. I think it would be warmly welcomed the world over. And I think that young man would be in more demand as the recipient of sponsor offers than any other sports person in the world.
Well, those are very encouraging words. A, I hope you're right. And B, I hope that more people speaking in those positive terms and not being scared of potential backlash, like I was being, properly negative, is encouraging for people coming through who aren't straight white men. But may I bother you before you go? We have a couple of listener questions. Do you mind if I quick fire them at you, Matt?
Go ahead.
And it is very nosy about the world of PR and communications. David, I think, asks a fantastic question here. You obviously can't give us details, but how much coded messaging takes place over the radios with the drivers, and the radio messages must be a PR headache?
Well, there is quite a lot of coding, And, people like me don't really need to know it. I could probably sit down and try and commit it all to memory. Is it a PR nightmare? Do you know what? I look at comms and PR and media work in general in a different way. I'm a poacher term gamekeeper anyway. I was a journalist for years before I went to the dark side and started working for teams in comms and PR. So I think we have to remember always that we are an entertainment business first and foremost. And the fans are by far the most preeminent people in this whole shebang. And that being the case, if a driver or anybody else issues a radio communication that's difficult or challenging or embarrassing, well, that's why we get paid, isn't it? To try to, find a way to conjure that into a positive bit of comms, or just go with the flow and ride the punches. Because, I worked with Lewis Hamilton for years back at McLaren.
Of course.
And Lewis, bless him, was very prone to making the odd remark on the radio and in the press.
He wears his heart on his mouth, doesn't he? A little bit.
Yeah. And, sometimes you'd think we're having a nice, peaceful day, and then Lewis would say something.
There's some telemetry.
By the way, I'm a massive fan of Lewis. Massive fan. I loved working with him. He's the greatest driver. And but rather than me cursing that, much better to say, well, yeah, that's tricky. Let me go and find a way of making it work. But ultimately, we're about putting bums on sofas in front of screens.
And as a dad, can you get them to stop using so much naughty language, please, Matt?
Congratulations on being a dad, by the way.
Well, I did most of the work, yeah.
Naughty language. It's a funny thing, isn't it? They use the radio in a number of ways. It's very obvious that they now use it in order to try to get it broadcast, and order also to bring it to the attention of the race director.
Play the referee, yeah.
Yeah, all this business about, oh, so-and-so is a bleep, bleep, bleep idiot. He just drove me off the track at turn 6. We know that's not only anger. It's also telegraphing a message both to the fans, the media, and indeed the race director.
Like Ocon with the Magnussen's front wing. It's going to fly off and it's going to kill all of us. It needs to be sorted. One last one before we let you go. Simon just says, whose job is it to come up with all the teammate games that they put on social media? Some of them are brilliant. Some of them, like McLaren's sloshing milk around whilst driving around Silverstone. It was just disgusting. But who comes up with those, and how important are they to the PR strategy?
Well, sometimes the best thing about a good idea is that you can't actually remember who had it, because it came out of a proper collaboration where you're sitting around chucking thoughts around and then suddenly it gels. And whose idea was that? Can't actually remember, because it came out of a genuine collaboration. So it is a team, but in terms of the types of things that your questioner is asking about, there is a small team, and such a risk, isn't it, naming people? Because if I name people, I'm bound to forget somebody. But I'll go for it anyway.
Go on.
Because I would say that Joanne Revel does a great job there. Steve Cooper does a great job there. Our 2 videographers do great jobs. That's Jimmy and Sam. There's also Will Piper, clever bloke, and anybody. It's like an Oscar-winning speech, isn't it? Anyone else I've forgotten that does a brilliant job.
Just remember, if Matt
me.
didn't specifically name you, it's because he doesn't value you or your work. So that's the important thing to get across. We won't take up any more of your time, Matt. Thank you so much for dropping in and giving us a moment in the life of in the shoes of a proper F1 team person. Matt is also an author. He has a book called The Boy Made the Difference, which is available on Amazon and bookshops, worth checking out. And where can we send people to check out your work and Racing Pride stuff?
So Racing Pride has its own website and Twitter and all the rest of it. Obviously, Aston Martin has the same things. If you want to buy The Boy Made the Difference, by the way, it's got nothing to do with Formula One. So you
just set that up. Yeah.
Expected that. But all proceeds go to charity, a children's cancer charity. So there you go. And it's available on Amazon, Book Depository, and in Kindle and paperback, and in all good bookshops.
Matt Bishop, the Bish, thank you very much for your time. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Excellent stuff. And finally, we're heading all the way over to China to catch up with our friend and streamer, Chester. How's it going, Chester?
Yeah, doing good.
You've been doing live watch-alongs over there in Mandarin?
Yeah, in Mandarin, live watch along and like race analysis videos and stuff, like videos.
I always get asked, why don't you guys do watch-alongs at Missed Apex? And I think, well, actually, I need to listen to some information from the commentators because they get information that we don't. But you could do it definitely, kind of from the live timings. But you'd want to be able to pick your shots and stuff. Do you struggle doing it without, without obviously with limited information?
Yeah, I don't think so because like when we are watching it live, I can have the F1 TV thing and have all the data on the screen and see. And also, like in like F1 TV, I can like have the audio set to FX, so it's only the ambient sound and also the team radio.
Oh,
so
okay, that's
I don't
interesting.
need to because like so here's the thing. This year, like everyone was expecting, hey, Joe is in F1 and it's gonna be huge in China and the audience can boom. And actually, it's not because for this year, so originally Tencent, who has the online streaming right for F1, they didn't re-sign the deal for this year. So
what? Even though there's the first ever Chinese driver.
Yes, that's like everyone's
that's
like
so frustrating.
And now, so till now the ninth race, there's no legal way to watch a F1 race live legally. You can watch it. There's a local TV network in Shanghai, but like anywhere else in China, you can't watch it live legally.
So you've become like kind of an unofficial stream for people to watch along in Mandarin.
Yeah. I made a few friends from the original commentator for the Tencent, and they come on the stream. And we chat about it. Yeah,
that would be like Britain suddenly not having the rights to F1, me doing live watch-alongs and just getting Crofty to come on and be
exactly like Crofty and Rondo. Yeah.
Oh well, that's fantastic. So hopefully, when there is a Chinese broadcast, they'll go, "Hey, we need Chester on there to be our F1 guy." There we go.
That'll be nice.
So just remember, when he's China's Crofty, we had him on Missed Apex here first. But look, I don't want to be that guy that's like, oh, Chester's from China. He must be, a massive fan of Wan Yu Zhou. Let's just get him on to talk about Wan Yu Zhou all the time. But I'd like to get your take on Wan Yu Zhou, if that's okay. So before the season, we started talking about him. Your hopes weren't massively high. There was, I think you were saying, as a pay driver, middling junior career. I have to say, I didn't realize quite how rich he was. But my opinion of Wan Yu Zhou has shifted a little bit. I'm starting to like the guy. I'm wondering, has your opinion shifted as well?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, I still remember before the season, I came on the show and I said, he's just another pay driver, same as maybe Latifi, maybe as Mazepin.
Yeah.
And I didn't have high hopes for him and just thinking, oh, yeah. And so for the first race, he got his point.
Straight away.
First race there, straight away. And wheel to wheel with Hamilton and Alonso. That's wow. Yeah. And he's really calm and collected for a rookie, for first race.
Do you know what I really like, Chester, is that he is racy and he looks smart. The positioning of his car is good. And he just, if you didn't know he was a paid driver, would you be judging him as a rookie this season? And I think from that point of view, he's passing the Turing test. What's the equivalent of the Turing test, but for a quote unquote real driver?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe because you can say the test is about not crashing and maybe not doing stupid stuff. But actually, considering a F1 rookie, for the past couple of years, maybe we say Latifi or maybe Yuki last year, or maybe Mick Schumacher. Joe is one of the better, or even one of the best looking junior, best looking rookies.
Yeah,
right. He's not causing yellow flags everywhere. He's not crashing his car. I think one of the only contacts is with Pierre Gasly during the sprint race in Imola. So he's still pretty slow compared to Bottas in quali, but we all know Bottas is a very good qualifier.
Yeah.
So I think if we can work on that, and like for the past 2 races, he's outqualified Valtteri, and in the race, he's like his race pace is really, really good.
Yeah, and I wonder if some of that has been masked by the DNFs as well.
Oh yeah, I think like we watched Azerbaijan Grand Prix live, and when Joe's engine go pop, and we just like, wow, that's devastating, because like he's like
where was he running? Where was he running? Do you remember?
About like 8th or 9th, and
okay.
he's on to like very, very good point scores, and yeah, that's really emotional training.
Yeah, and I'm making sure I don't get carried away. It's just that every little data point that I'm starting to see sort of ticks the boxes. So, like I said, his racecraft seems to be competent. He's racy. He's not phoning in the performances. But then, delightfully, he seems to be quite a nice character as well, and he seems to be very kind of charming, good-humored, which always helps.
Yeah, it definitely helps. Like, if you don't have the speed, at least, let's say, like Latifi, yeah, he's not that fast, but like at least he's very friendly.
At least he's lovely.
Yeah, at least like everyone likes him and like loves working with him. And yeah, so Joe is like, at least if he's not fast, at least he's likable. He's polite. He's saying all the right things, like unlike some other people on streams, right?
Yeah. We'll not get into Vips, but yeah. So what we're saying, I don't want to damn Guan Yu Zhou with faint praise, because so far we're saying he's polite and rarely late. That's what we're throwing at him, and I think we are coming from a place of low expectations. But I didn't actually realize quite how much of a paid driver he was. I thought it was more of a Tsunoda type deal where Honda wanted Tsunoda in, and I'm sure Honda want a Japanese driver in F1. I thought it was, and I got told that it was more about Chinese businesses wanting to back a Chinese driver. But actually, the family is incredibly wealthy. I didn't realize that he had a kart track built for him.
Yeah. And if you don't know, when he's in F2, the team Virtuosi changed the name to UNI Virtuosi, UNI Uni, which is his name.
Right.
The Zhou Guan Yu, the Yu is universe in Chinese, so they literally changed the F2 team's name to like match him.
Oh, hang on, sorry. Yeah. Guan Yu means universe.
So Zhou is his last name, right? And Guan means it has 2 meanings. First, it means crown, and second, it means champion. And Yu means universe. So yeah, maybe it's like champion of the universe. That's a quite good name.
I would like to change my name to Champion of the Universe. It might not go down as well in British culture. I'll be completely honest with you, Chester. But yeah, so yeah, obviously he comes in with incredible wealth, has a go-kart track made for him, then moves to England to go and do racing, to put himself in a racy environment. Does that say something about Chinese racing, that they feel like it was not competitive enough? I mean, obviously there's a lot of racing closer to home.
Yeah. So for him, I think like everyone knows, if you want to get really serious about racing, if you want to get into Formula One, you are going to England.
Is that right? Okay. Is that what the perception around the world?
Yeah, because like most of the F1 teams are based there, and like except maybe Ferrari, AlphaTauri, and maybe Haas, but like all the engineers, all the drivers, the resources are there. The networks are there. So if you want to improve, if you want to like face off with the other best of the world, you go to England. And that's what he did around 12 or 13. So yeah, he left China at a really, really young age.
I mean, that does show a lot of commitment. And just to fend off any emails, Alfa Romeo are based in Switzerland, and Haas are in the UK. So what about his teammate, Valtteri Bottas? We've talked about his qualifying pace. So obviously we know how well he can qualify against Lewis Hamilton. But at Mercedes, a lot of times he went absent and perhaps didn't do as well on these tyres on race pace. So the feeling now has to be building that Joe has actually got an opportunity to look good against a well-fancied driver with a good reputation.
Yeah, exactly. That's what a lot of people thought. Like, we were not expecting Zhou to go toe to toe with Valtteri in qualifying on Saturday, and that has shown. So for the first 6 races this year, they have like one of the largest medium gaps between teammates. So that's like 1% difference, so which is huge. Like, for example, like Albon and maybe Gasly has like 0.5% to Verstappen, and everyone's like slammed down
freaking out.
Yeah, and like 1% is huge. To be fair, he had some like bad luck. Like Zhou is really, really unlucky. Like whenever he's good on Sunday, his car breaks down, and when he's trying to set a fast lap, either Alpha sent him out at the wrong time, or maybe in Bahrain his DRS doesn't work, so he lost like 0.2, 0.3 second per lap. So anyway, so 1% is still a huge gap to Valtteri. But for the past 2 races, he's like, we don't know what's happened to Bottas. He's like not that like really fast in quali compared to Zhou. Maybe Zhou is catching up. Maybe they have something to do with the engine, because like it keeps blowing off. So
yeah, Zhou's got new engines, to be fair. So there's that.
Maybe that'll help. And there was some like we were suspecting maybe Alpha is turning down their engines like in the past 2 races just to keep it safe when Zhou's having like a very good weekend. So maybe there are various reasons, but at least we can say Zhou is not that far off from a very well respected and very experienced F1 driver. So
from a Chinese F1 fandom point of view, though, and looking forward, obviously you would like Zhou to do well, to increase the fan base, increase your personal wealth when you become the Chinese David Croft. At least he is not bothering blue flags. He's genuinely fighting for points. There's reason to be optimistic.
Yeah, exactly. And at least for blue flags, at least he's following all the blue flags and not like blocking fast cars behind him. So that's a plus. Yeah, really, really hopeful. Yeah, because like before the season, we were all like, he's gonna get like Bottas gonna wipe the floor. But no, he's actually like showing good pace in race in quali and actually improving. He's like, I'm really hopeful for what's gonna happen the later half of the year.
Well, normally we tend to give rookies 6 months, a 6-month pass to go and cause chaos, get used to it, and get onto the back of your teammate pace wise. So certainly Zhou seems like he's slightly ahead of the curve on that end. So hopefully Chester will get you on a mailbag episode soon. Stay safe. Where can people follow you? Do you bother us on Twitter and stuff?
I don't really post anything on Twitter, so don't bother. If you speak Mandarin, if you want to hear us talk about Formula One stuff, do race reviews, go follow 方程式漫谈 on all the big podcasting platforms.
Already do. I already do. Chester, thanks for your time, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, that was another Missed Apex magazine show. I hope you enjoyed that. What a week it's been for Missed Apex podcast, and what fine company we're keeping. Kevin Clark, kind of a big deal in America land. Go and show him some love on social media so that he'll want to come back and hang out with us on a Missed Apex panel in the future. And to get a current F1 communications officer into the shed on a podcast, that felt unobtainable. So that was something a little bit special for us here in shed content land. And of course, it was fantastic to go and catch up with Chester. There is a growing F1 community in China. They don't seem to have any kind of formal representation or production there. And Chester is a talented guy, and it looks like he's going to be right at the front of riding a wave of F1 content creation. So I really hope we can get him on future panels and race reviews as well. If you want to catch our doom-scrolling patron show, that is for patrons only, it's not extra special secret content behind a paywall. It is worse content, but we do go into like personal stuff ask the crew what they've been up to. It's a lot more relaxed, and of course a lot of F1 stuff too. It's been getting generally good feedback, so although it's worse content, some people are enjoying it. We stream it live. We have the live chat room there as well. Patreon.com/MissedApex. You get a special link so that you put that into your podcast search bar, and it brings up the patron-only feed, which is ad-free and includes all these extra doom scrolling ones. But you'll also get emailed the link to the live stream and the video version of that too. And that's about all. So if you're not a patron, if you're like, oh, they're kind of okay to listen to, but not enough to support, I get you. I feel you. The next time we will see you then will be 8 p.m. after the British Grand Prix. 8 p.m. UK time, we'll hit stream. Who's on the panel? We've got Brad and Ellen joining us, and Matt. We'll bring Matt, I suppose. Oh, you might see me a little earlier. I think I'm going to be wandering around Silverstone for Friday practice 1, practice 2. So if you spot me, come and say hi. Until next time, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast. Oh, you probably don't know what I look like. Kind of like a Malteser with a rubbish moustache beard set. Should I wear a Missed Apex hat? Would that make it easier? See ya.